Hello and welcome to News Centre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Today we focus on two key bills before Parliament, the Nuclear Energy Bill and the Higher Education Bill. First, let's talk about the bill that aims to open up the closely guarded nuclear energy sector to private players. The SHANTI bill is an acronym for Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India. The bill will effectively end government monopoly in nuclear energy and also encourage more small modular reactors. The government is also proposing to create a unified legal framework and allow 49% foreign direct investment as well. The new legislation will replace the Atomic Energy Act of 1962 and the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act passed in 2010. The larger goal of the bill is to achieve 100 gigawatts of nuclear power capacity by 2047. What has sparked a controversy is the bill elaborating that operators shall be liable for damages except those caused by grave natural disasters of an exceptional character. Liabilities are also exempt during any armed conflict, civil war, insurrection or act of terrorism. There is renewed interest in nuclear power, not just in India but around the world. Globally, electricity demand is rising sharply and is set to keep rising through this decade. According to the International Energy Agency, global electricity demand is projected to grow strongly through 2030, and India will be one of the fastest growing electricity markets globally. At the same time, electricity consumption from data centers and artificial intelligence-driven computing is expected to more than double by 2030, adding significant pressure on power grids worldwide. Together, these trends underline the growing need for reliable, large-scale and low-emission sources of energy, and that's where nuclear power comes in. The International Atomic Energy Agency has raised its nuclear power growth projections for the fifth year in a row. To take this discussion forward, I'm now joined by Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the United States, and Karthik Ganeshan, Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. Thank you very much for joining us. Karthik, let me begin by asking you, when it comes to the issue of liability, and especially US companies showing interest in the civil nuclear energy sector in India, we didn't see much interest ever since the signing of the deal because of high liability. With this bill capping liability at 3,000 crores and also paving the way for private entities to enter and invest in the nuclear sector, do you think there will be now concrete interest among US nuclear energy companies?
Absolutely, Parikshit. I mean, this was the clear stumbling block when it came to operationalizing the 123 Act that was signed in 2008 under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Clearly, the proof of the pudding will be in how much capacity actually gets deployed now that the SHANTI bill will be tabled and eventually passed into an act. And that will, to a large part, depend on what is the final price that the Indian consumer and, for that matter, the operator of the nuclear power plant in India or the utilities that will be purchasing it will have to pay for it. And if that number is significantly higher than what we are used to, and if we aren't able to place a strategic value on the value of electricity that might come from technology that involves, overseas participation and even sort of, licensing of technology that's currently available overseas, then there's a very likely chance that, we may not see foreign participation. So it also is really dependent on how does the financials of the offering from foreign participants look like, and what is the ability of the decision makers in India to strategically think of what covering for 50 years worth of energy costs and baking that into a contract means. We haven't looked at projects that are that long, especially involving foreign participants in a while. So it'll be new learning, and I think we'll have to wait and watch to see how much interest does it actually garner once we demonstrate how much money we're willing to put down on the table in order to procure electricity. Granted that, of course, that it will it will make a lot of domestic manufacturing and the industry thrive, but ultimately the price is of electricity, which is a politically sensitive commodity and which we want to sort of be seen as offering at the lowest possible price to all our consumers. So that's something that I think will determine how enthusiastic is the overseas participation in this.
Right. Let me also get an Ambassador Meera Shankar at this point. Ambassador Meera Shankar, civil nuclear energy had been a continued area of cooperation between India and the United States ever since the civil nuclear agreement was signed, which was itself very contentious. Do you see that this will now be a pivotal moment which will enable greater investments from the US into India, maybe Europe to India as well?
I think we have to wait and see because, our discussions with foreign partners on nuclear energy cooperation did not really fructify. And there were various reasons for this. In the US, the nuclear part of the companies, the nuclear technology part had been sold to Japanese companies. So it was GE, which had sold to Hitachi, and then Westinghouse, I think, had sold to Toshiba. So there were, it wasn't really that these were just American companies. We first needed to get Japanese government clearance, and that took a long time because they had their own hesitations. Then there was the whole question of pricing, because the prices were much higher than the Indian market could absorb. And therefore, it would have been non-viable. Then we suggested that they should look at getting some domestic manufacturing done in India through technology partnerships to reduce costs. But they weren't willing to look at that. And from the US side, they had cited the nuclear liability law as a limiting factor, saying open-ended liability for the supplier meant that this was a no-go. Similarly, with the French, if you've seen, their own reactor, the reactor that they were building in Finland, had huge cost and time overruns. So these are not simple issues. And as far as India is concerned, the Department of Atomic Energy is actually the cheapest producer of small nuclear power plants in the world. And their technology is a bit outmoded because it's dependent on heavy water. But, this means that we don't have to be in a hurry to tie up partnerships. And in fact, if you see in space,
all right,
it is
Ambassador Shankar, I'm going to come back.
If I may,
I'm going to come back to you.
Sentence.
Sure.
Finish this, because like ISRO, what they have done is they have developed private partnerships by giving out the technology that they have developed. And what I see is that is likely to be a more, feasible mold for cooperation as far as India is concerned. Now, getting the private sector in is a major aspect of this bill, but we have to see how it goes.
All right, let's also get in Karthik once again. Karthik, do the rules and regulations as envisaged in this bill, do they align with global standards?
Belatedly, yes, right? I think it's taken a while for us to sort of come around to say that we will interpret civil nuclear liability the way the rest of the world does, in the way that liability is limited to certain parties and does not extend to the entire list of suppliers that have likely come in of key components. And they've also limited it to ensure that there is a cap on it, right? Ultimately, and of course, there will be a pool that is created to then facilitate the payments in the event of, cases where actual disasters happen, for instance, like the Fukushima one. But of course, the interesting part is that India is now looking to scale nuclear technology in an era where we are looking at passive safety in a big way, where such disasters that have passed are precluded inherently by the design of nuclear reactors. And India will likely benefit from all of these developments. And it's a good time for us to, I think, get on the same page as the rest of the world in the way we interpret nuclear liability. Granted, India has had a bad experience, for instance, in the case of the Bhopal gas tragedy, which of course resulted in such a conservative interpretation of allowing a foreign entity to sort of go scot-free at that moment. But I think the bill currently addresses a lot of that and brings it on par with the rest of the world. And I would like to say this, though, that it is very important that we actually involve the foreign participants, primarily because we haven't demonstrated the appetite to finance nuclear energy at the scale at which it's required. And it's very likely that the use of the technology that Ms. Shankar also mentioned, which is the indigenously developed one, or at least what has been demonstrated so far, can help us scale the barriers that we've faced so far in getting up to the 5 gigawatts a year, which we will require. We are currently at 9 gigawatts after nearly a 3-decade program. So foreign participation is almost imperative. And what really remains to be seen is, can we think strategically and ensure that we bring in foreign participation, negotiate hard for costs that actually represent the cost of technology, and more important, something that actually cost effective. Yeah.
Right. Karthik, my final question to Ambassador Meera Shankar. Ambassador Shankar, now, when it comes to getting those investments, what more reforms on ease of doing business we need to do in order to attract global players? And despite the fact that this was a continuing conversation with the United States, do you feel that under the current Trump administration, which is all about investing in America, will the US companies look at India in a big way now that this 49% FDI route has been opened up?
Well, they are certainly showing interest, if I may say so, because India would be a large market. And if we are looking at really going to zero in terms of carbon emissions, then nuclear energy has to become a very important part of that basket, because renewables can be intermittent, and to stabilize as a base load power, you would need nuclear energy rather than thermal, because this could provide that stabilizing source of energy. But, we wasted, I think, almost a decade since the nuclear, agreement was signed, civil nuclear agreement was signed with the US. In negotiating with foreign partners, we did not sanction a single Indian nuclear power plant. And the net result is our own nuclear energy program has been starved of funds. So I think it's something we have to wait and see. I don't know how it will go, because we had identified 2 sites, one for the French possible nuclear reactor, and 1 or 2 sites for the American reactors. But none of the negotiations proceeded. The only ones which did were with the Russians for Kudankulam, where 2 power plants are now operating, 2 are on the verge of commissioning, and 2 more are going to be, in the pipeline. So a total of 6 large projects were commissioned in Kudankulam, but the talks with other partners did not make headway, as I said, for a variety of reasons, including nuclear liability, but costs were a major factor. Unwillingness to share technology was a second, and third was, how to involve Indian partners in that process.
Right.
So the whole idea
lots on the table.
Sorry.
Yeah. So Ambassador Shankar, I've completely run out of time, but thank you very much for explaining to us some of the diplomatic and historical reservations that global players in the US and France had. Let's see if those earlier MOUs and relationships can now be renewed as a result of the changes in law that we are bringing about in India. Thank you very much, Karthik and Ambassador Shankar, for joining us. We're taking a short break, but coming up, the Union government has proposed a new higher education bill in a bid to tackle multiplicity of regulators and approvals. More details on that when we return. Stay tuned.